Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Salted Hash. My name is Steve Reagan, Senior Staff Writer at CSO Online. I'm joined by Usif Sidan, the VP of Email Security Services at Barracuda. And today we're going to talk about some phishing attacks that spoof Office 365, DocuSign, and other formats. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Usif. How are you? Thank you for joining me.
Great. How are you?
I'm good. This is an interesting report you've put out, and it's near and dear to my heart. We're talking scammers trying to pretend to be Office and DocuSign and basically just scamming their way to the heart of the enterprise. It's a very good report. You may or may not know, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. We've been seeing a lot of upticks in just baseline phishing and actually attempted BEC all across the board for about the past 7 months here at IDG. And I have made it like a personal hobby to break these emails down and see how they work and track them back to where they go and build out a larger awareness piece. And
maybe you should join our team.
Maybe it might be fun. And it's been enlightening to see how the criminals adapt to emerging technologies and filtering mechanisms and new rule sets and things like this. Now, I know that in this report, that was something that interested you as well. So let's talk about that. How are the criminals able to get past email defenses and pretend to be Outlook or DocuSign and what have you to get to the end user?
Sure. So, there's really been an evolution in these types of, kind of phishing and targeted phishing attacks. So, initially, right, what attackers try to do would be to send a link, sometimes to a website that had some kind of a virus or it would download, malware to the computer of the user. And pretty quickly, security companies figured out, that there's two main ways to stop these types of attacks. So one is if you can just see that, if one bad link has been sent to one customer and we were able to identify, the customer reported to us that it was bad, obviously we can block it for a lot of other customers or they reported it as spam. Second way to stop these things is basically, if it's trying to see, if this is a website that's trying to download something when they land on the page, and of course, if that thing looks kind of like a virus, it's pretty easy to detect. So that's why, if you look at kind of the evolution of phishing, there was basically, I think there was a lot of phishing, and then there was some kind of a plateau, right, where, a lot of these attacks got stopped. But in security, it's always a cat and mouse game, exactly like you were saying. And so what the attackers have figured out is, they can easily actually bypass these defenses by personalizing the links. So making sure that they don't say the same link is not sent across attacks. So basically every time they launch a new campaign, a new attack, they use a unique link. So that's one way they figured out. The second one is the websites themselves. They actually understood that, it's actually, if the website doesn't appear malicious to the security system, then it won't stop, then there's nothing stopping it, right? And so what the attackers have understood is the best way to gather credentials is not necessarily through infecting a computer with malware or something like that. All you need to do is just present a nice sign-in page, right? We all are compelled to sign in. So this kind of combination of, evasion and using unique links with social engineering really is what makes these attacks so successful.
So I've noticed a lot in the patterns here over the last couple of months that the way the kits are constructed is pretty basic and generic, but it's not really horrible. It's just kind of a way to fit itself into your normal workflow. So what they're counting on is it is natural for the target or the victim in this case to see a link requesting someone open an Office or a Google Docs account or to look at DocuSign, and they follow through, and they're hoping that because that's a part of your workflow, you're not going to notice that the template's not exactly the same when you go log in. Office 365 is a great example of this. A lot of companies personalize their company's login portal. So when you type in your corporate username, it automatically directs you to a unique login background screen or something like this. Well, for these scams, it's never like that because it's impossible to try and predict how that stuff's going to look. So they keep it really basic and generic, and they use the templates that are easily adaptable. Have you noticed any change in that workflow? Are the criminals actually starting to mirror customers' login portals, or are they still keeping it basic?
So I think there's just a lot of variance. So not all hackers are created equal. Okay, so and also not all targets are created equal, right? So what we've seen with our customer set, which is quite diverse actually. It's anywhere from like really small businesses to kind of big famous corporations. Is it depends, right? So most of the attacks, I'd say, are still they're not that personalized, right? They wouldn't go through the effort of actually, for example, personalizing the way the link looks and even the text of the email. Maybe they would typically use, so they have some kind of a template, let's say a DocuSign email, and they just would change the name of the recipient in the email, but they wouldn't really customize it beyond that. But on the other end of the spectrum, we do see some attacks that are extremely customized and extremely well done. So I'll give you it's not exactly the DocuSign example, but I'll give you an example from a BEC domain. So we've seen, for example, attacks where the attackers try to go after real estate firms, and they kind of monitor their internal communications and wait until a specific deal, someone's going to specifically go and buy a house. And then, right before that person is about to send their down payment, you get an email, hey, this is the bank account that you need to send your down payment to for this specific, address, et cetera. So, my point is, if the payoff is big enough, if it's hundreds of thousands of dollars or more, they can customize an HTML page. You don't need to be,
rocket scientist.
A rocket scientist to customize an HTML page. So, and also, one other thing about these attacks, right, is they do give them access to the corporate kind of network and corporate communication, which that also helps them, gives them a lot more clues on what is the normal communication patterns in the company, what templates do they use, et cetera. So that really helps. And we definitely have seen attackers do a lot of reconnaissance in this area.
And there's a huge difference between the attacks you've observed in the last couple of months between the general kit-based, let's flood the market and see who bites, versus the targeted attacks. Like, to give you an example on my end, the targeted attacks actually used my name, and they were the emails themselves were written specifically for me. You can tell. The only thing is they without getting too deep into why their attack failed, let's just say that they really didn't do their homework as deep as they needed to. So the domains and the way they were talking, it was wrong. But if they'd have done their homework, it's very easily, I could have probably have fallen for that scam. I'm not infallible. So I'm willing to admit that, as a journalist, I'm just as much of a target as anybody else. And I'm just as easy of a target as anybody else. It only takes one simple slip to get caught on this. So let's look at going back to your report. You've seen an uptick. What kind of volumes have you seen lately?
So it depends, right, on the company and and sometimes, by the way, I'll just say one of the weird things about our job is it's not always clear why certain companies get attacked and why aren't not as much. It's not, it's somewhat random sometimes, like companies you would not expect just get attacked a lot and vice versa. But generally speaking, we see for some of our customers, dozens and hundreds of these attacks every day sometimes, especially when there's a campaign that's specifically targeting a company. So for example, we had several customers that got hit with like massive DocuSign campaigns that were going after everybody in the company that had anything to do with customers, support, sales, purchasing. And you could see clearly the attackers were really trying to infiltrate that specific company's email system, for example, in order to launch subsequent attacks. So, point is there is variance, but it can be, tens and hundreds of attacks a day for some customers.
Have you figured out the source of the contact, the initial contact? Like, where are they getting the email accounts and the information to know who to target?
Yeah, part of the problem, part of the difficulty we face in general with email is generally anonymous, right? It's kind of similar to Twitter and all the problems we have with Twitter, right? Anybody can log in and open an email account, for example, on Gmail or Comcast.net. And if someone uses like a webmail client, it's really hard to actually understand where the person is actually coming from. So, generally speaking, we definitely see a lot of emails coming from countries outside the U.S., a lot from European countries or East Asia, for example. But there's also a lot coming from just, American providers. There's also a lot of attacks coming from domains that were registered in the U.S. For example, when folks register a domain that's really similar to the company's name. So there's no, unfortunately, I can't tell you that there's a very clear pattern. So it's all over the place. I mean, we anecdotally, I know that some of these BC incidents have actually originated from the U.S. as well. So it's not something that is just coming out of, certain foreign countries. Mm-hmm. One thing, and kind of just another corollary to that, we also track what's called domain spoofing. Where basically these are attacks where people are trying to kind of use the domain of the company and impersonating it, and we track the IPs of where those emails come from. And again, you see it's really distributed across the world. It's not from just one specific geography.
So when it comes to the actual targeting itself, when someone in sales is getting hit, like you said, you'd seen with the DocuSign stuff, is anybody had anything to do with the customers? Where are the criminals getting the emails to target these actual individuals? So how do they know the difference between Mark in sales and Mark in supply? How do they know who they're targeting? Or are they just blindly trying every name in the book against the company's domain?
So one thing I can tell you absolutely for sure is they definitely scrape websites and buy any public company or any company that has executives. Those are usually still the top targets from what we see just in terms of frequency. But then when you look at employees that are below that, like a salesperson or a sales manager, for example, it's probably typically one of two ways. It's either looking at social media, something like LinkedIn, or they're literally buying lists, very similar to the way, business to business company would buy lists to try to target, sales. So, you can buy a list with a lot of contacts from, I can go buy a list of IDG probably with a lot of different roles today from a repository and just, pay for it. And and it's very possible also, like in the dark web, these lists are kind of circulating. So it's not hard, it's not hard to get a list with an email and a position of someone in a company these days, right? And finally, right, like a lot of times what the attackers are doing is they're getting in the door, they're infiltrating, doing reconnaissance, and then they learn a lot more about the organizations once they've already infiltrated into an account. So that lets them launch subsequent attacks.
That was actually the case last October, November for the Office 365 attacks. They would compromise one person's account and then look at their address book, and that's how they moved the scam forward, was internally.
And that's something, that's kind of what we're seeing, that attack just in vast numbers right now. It's a scourge. We see IT teams, and security teams literally, just we have talked to customers like hundreds of accounts a week. It's just a nightmare chasing after, the compromised accounts. So.
For those of you watching at home, though, to put this in perspective, seeing hundreds a week is bad, but if you're at a large enterprise, seeing hundreds a week is actually kind of normal. So it really depends on the scale of your operation and how you're dealing with it. So I think that's an important note to add to that. It's the fact that, hundreds is bad, but if you're a really large enterprise, hundreds is normal. And that's the scary part, is the fact that, you'll see hundreds actually make it to the inbox and hit the inbox, and you'll see thousands that get blocked. And it's always those small percentages that get through that you have to worry about, because if if just one person sees that and they're in working at a rushed clip, and it just kind of matches their workflow, and they don't even think about it until it's too late, that that's it, game over. And yeah, that moves into the awareness training and the incident response, which we can cover in another video. So before we wrap up here, one other question. Have you noticed anything stand out in the emails that are unique that gets them past all these filters and works their way into the inbox? I know earlier you were talking and you said that, the links are a key thing. And from experience, you and I both know that they compromise legitimate websites and they use them to get past a lot of reputation filters and things like this. So is that what you're seeing, or is it something a little different?
Yeah, exactly. So the links are oftentimes basically a website that, some small business, like an upholstery shop in Kansas, for example, that got compromised, and the attackers just inserted a sign-in page in there. And so oftentimes traditional filters will miss these emails because when you look at the reputation, it's going to be sterling. It's legitimate website, legitimate business, has been around for a while. So they really don't understand that it's malicious. It's trying to steal credentials. It just looks like a sign-in page. I mean, a sign-in page is not trying to download a virus or something. So
yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for taking the time to talk to me. I appreciate it. You have a very good afternoon. And if you want to learn more about BEC attacks or phishing in general, head over to csoonline.com. My name's Steve Reagan, and this has been Salted Hash. We'll see you next week.